Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new video in my series Building Nancy Drew in The Sims 4. Today I am bringing you the second part of my build of Treasure in the Royal Tower's very own Wickford Castle. Last week I brought you the build part of Wickford Castle, so the entire exterior and then the floor plan and all of the build items. So the floors, the walls, the windows, the 10 billion columns that this build has. I did all of that in the video last week. If you haven't had a chance to see that yet, I'll be sure to put a card in the upper corner of this video so you can go check that out as well. But today's video is going to be entirely furnishing Wickford Castle, which is no small feat. It is a huge, massive build, and there's a great deal to furnish. When I was going about furnishing this, I decided to start by doing all of the spaces that Nancy does not see in the games. So for example, here I was working on some of the guest rooms and the guest suites that Nancy doesn't stay in and doesn't go in. I kept a lot of them similar. So like we have these two matching rooms with this more taupey, grayish kind of wallpaper in the same wallpaper style that Nancy's room has. All of the rooms have that same wallpaper, just in different colors. And thankfully, I was able to just use the copy tool to copy over the bathrooms and the bedrooms for this kind of corner of the castle. I love when I can do that. It makes things go so much faster. It makes it so much easier. It was something I was able to do when I did my Ryokan build as well. I'll try to remember to link a card for the Ryokan build as well. But it just makes things go so much faster, especially when working with such massive spaces. And it makes sense for a place that is supposed to be a hotel. A lot of the rooms are going to be essentially the same. So I'm grateful for those moments when the build happens to make my life a little bit easier. If I can maintain everything and then just kind of keep the same color scheme or something like that, that helps a lot. Despite the build making my job a little bit easier in that sense, this build still did take a really long time. I think if I were to add everything up, it was probably about a 6-hour build total. Maybe a little bit more than that, depending. Because I did cut out some of the footage as well, so it probably was actually longer than that. I end up cutting out a little bit of the decorating of the hallway, because when I do decorate the hallways, I'll show you a little bit of it, but what I ended up having to do was basically just use every single piece of fancy artwork that the game has and spread them out randomly throughout the castle. When Nancy walks through the hallways of Wickford Castle, we have all of these beautiful art pieces on the walls, and I really wanted to get that idea across. Plus, I think it helps with the more regal feeling of Wickford Castle, so filling in the hallways in that way was very important to me, but it was pretty monotonous, and I figured you guys will get it after seeing a couple of paintings being put on the wall. The idea will come across fairly quickly. The bathrooms, similarly, I probably could have cut out because they're all basically the same, but I just kind of liked how the bathrooms looked. I enjoyed the really rich colors. I enjoyed that they only had bathtubs. Maybe it's not the most functional thing in the world, but I feel like if you're staying at a castle, taking a shower just doesn't feel as authentic. I want the real castle experience, even if it's a little inconvenient. And maybe the TVs aren't that realistic. Not all of the rooms have TVs, but some of them do. Again, this is a hotel. I feel like they've updated it enough to have some of the rooms at least have some kind of nice modern things that guests would come to expect in a hotel. So you still get the castle experience, but you also can, watch TV. Good old times. I was momentarily thinking about actually going to a hotel and remembering what that life was like. Seems like forever ago when going to hotels was a thing, but anyway, We're now moving on to this bedroom down here, which I decided was actually going to be the owner's or manager's suite. So I put in a little kitchenette here with just like a mini fridge and a sink and everything. So they have their own kitchen here. I'm assuming this would be Christy Lane's space. Christy Lane is the owner of Wickford Castle. I don't think that Dexter lives at the castle. Jacques certainly doesn't. It sounds like Jacques lives somewhere else. And Lisa and Professor Hotchkiss are guests at the hotel, so they just have their own rooms. But I figured this would be like where the person who owns the castle would stay if they were staying overnight. Maybe Christy has a house somewhere else too, but I liked the idea of having this manager suite right off of the office and right off of the entryway as well. So I included a little kitchenette, a nice little bedroom space, a little sitting area, and then kind of just like a dresser and a bookshelf. Enough things to make it feel like a completed room with kind of all of the basics that you would need, while still maintaining a lot of the design of the hotel. I can't imagine shopping for all of the furniture and like the architectural things that one would need in order to spruce up Wickford Castle. It's such a unique idea. I mentioned this in the first video too, but the idea behind Wickford Castle is that Ezra Wickford, the creator, builder, the mastermind behind it, decided to really just piece together castles that had already been built. So it wasn't supposed to be one cohesive structure. It was supposed to be kind of cobbled together in a weird puzzle sort of way, which is very interesting, but also in The Sims would be really difficult to do. I certainly like having a more cohesive style throughout all of Wickford Castle, and I have a feeling that Christy Lane would as well. I mean, if I were to inherit a castle that was just like crazy and super like, I don't know, that every single room and every single space needed different things, that would be super overwhelming. You wouldn't necessarily be able to have every guest room or every bathroom be completely different from one another. So I'm imagining that when this space was updated and renovated, brought into the modern age by Christy Lane, that she had kept those things in mind. Like, she wanted it to still feel regal. She wanted it to still feel like a really fancy castle, a really eclectic, eccentric castle, but also there's a flow to it. There's a purpose, there's a meaning behind everything. Plus, it just looks better in The Sims. So ultimately, that's where we're at. So the the manager suite and the office space are now done. And we're now moving on to this giant ballroom area. So in the game, this space is closed off and Nancy cannot go into it. However, when you go up to the second floor, Nancy can take a right turn and she can wander through all these hallways. So there is clearly space up on the second level that Nancy can walk through, even though the game suggests that there actually isn't space on the bottom level to support that upper level. So I filled it in. It ended up being massive. And I was like, what on earth can we put here? Oh yeah, like a ballroom. I mean, if we're thinking about a fancy hotel, a fancy resort kind of thing, people would probably often come here wanting to hold business meetings or maybe weddings or parties or something like that. So I decided to just convert this space into a huge ballroom space. I sized up a violin there to look like a cello. So over here we have kind of like a strings musical section. There's a piano on the other side, a big bar, dance floor. And then I put in a bunch of tables and chairs as well. So it's not fully ready for like a Sims wedding, but it could very easily be made to be ready for a Sims wedding. I'm not exactly sure how one would classify this lot in The Sims either. Right now, it's a residential lot, and I actually moved Father Winter in. That's basically The Sims version of Santa Claus. I moved him into the lot because, I mean, it's snowy. It makes sense. I'm sure Father Winter would love this place. But he's living there now. I don't think the lot would make a ton of sense as a residential lot because then your Sims would have to move here to visit here unless you want to own Wickford Castle. I mean, you do you. If that's your dream, please do. That sounds awesome. But in the game in Treasure in the Royal Tower, Wickford Castle is like a rental space where you would rent a room. So you could turn it into a rental lot, but it would be a really expensive rental lot. So your Sims would have to have money cheats or just be extremely wealthy in order to do that. That's certainly an option. I suppose you could turn it into a restaurant because we do technically have the stove down here, a fridge, we have seating, so you could maybe turn it into a restaurant and then just stay there, a park, I don't know. Some sort of public community lot, I think, would make the most sense. So then your Sims could come here and then they could walk right outside to the mountain, do skiing like they would in Treasure in the Royal Tower in the actual game or whatnot, and then come back, sleep, eat here, all that good stuff. It's a pretty multifunctional lot. There's a lot of things going on here. This space is just the kitchen and kind of storage room area. So I would imagine that in those very fridges is where we find 50 chicken drumsticks. All you can eat drumsticks for the professor herself. So when Dexter tells Jacques to get them out of the freezer, I'm imagining those were the freezers. I also put this little craft box in this office space because I imagine those were Jacques' art supplies that he uses to make his hope boxes. They're very much like childish. They're definitely meant to be more kids' arts and crafts supplies. I thought that was kind of funny. I personally enjoyed that, but it gets the idea across that these are Jacques' art supplies while he makes his hope boxes. And this is just a little office space where Jacques works. I add in a desk and a computer in here. I figured he would need those for signing out equipment, keeping track of things. I'm assuming the storage containers have like files and information, extra materials that maybe he needs to repair, stuff like that. It's a reasonable little office space, not super cluttered or anything, but perfectly functional and gets the idea across for what the space needs. And then the outside of this little office space is going to be filled in with a lot of items from Snowy Escape. It's actually perfect timing that Snowy Escape came out fairly recently because we got a bunch of skiing and snowboarding paraphernalia. So now I could put that in the basement of Wickford Castle and actually make it look like a ski resort and have all of the necessary materials to do that. I also use these metal benches. They're technically the prison benches from the Get to Work expansion pack, but they look exactly like the kinds of benches that I have seen or experienced whenever I go to a ski place, a ski resort. They always have these metal benches, and I don't know why, but they're pretty much always there. So I use those benches and then just kind of fill in the whole space with decorations from Snowy Escape. I had a lot of fun doing the locker room. I think we'll move over to the locker room in a little bit here, but I went into the debug menu and pulled out a bunch of the skis and snowboard items and then just kind of placed them all around the locker room. So it looked like people were in the process of getting their skis, getting all of their snow stuff on, and being able to head out to the slopes and have a good time. I mentioned this in the first video, but you unfortunately cannot walk outside from the downstairs locker room. There isn't a door because this is actually a basement space, and if I were to put stairs to go up so that it would go outside, it would be right smack dab in the middle of the ballroom. So unfortunately that does not work. I wasn't able to do that, but the idea is there. And it's not like your Sims have to come down here to use the rental equipment anyway. It's more just for show, because in Snowy Escape, they just, they get their rental equipment at the top of the hill, or they bring their own and it's just in their inventory right away. So again, just for show, but this might be one of my favorite rooms in the whole build. Even though it's so simple, I just love how it looks because it feels very much like an actual ski resort locker room. But that was one of the last more simple spaces. We are now moving on to all of the spaces that we can actually see in game. So now starting off recreating Nancy's room with all of the furniture. And when I do recreations of the spaces that we can actually see, I go step by step through the walkthroughs that I've done of all of the games, and I really take a look at all of the items. I try to match them as closely as possible, and I really especially focus on items that we can interact with. So like the radiator, for example, we'll be placing a radiator in pretty soon. we have to have a radiator. It's kind of a big plot point in Treasure in the Royal Tower, weirdly enough, having that radiator. I definitely figured that was important to include. I also try to roughly go off of the color scheme that they have in the games. It's kind of funny though, because in The Sims, a lot of the times the colors will just really contrast in kind of a garish way. For example, in the entryway of Wickford Castle, the whole grand entryway space, it actually has black and white marble tiles on the floor, and then the walls themselves are kind of brownish beige. But when I did that in The Sims, it was just like, ooh, it was just way too much. So sometimes I take some creative liberties on the color choices just to make things look a little bit nicer. They're usually pretty minor tweaks, but here and there they feel important. Here we're about to put in the radiator, so important. I do eventually decide that all of the rooms need radiators, so I will at some point go and put the radiator in every room, because everyone needs a squeaky, bubbling, screeching radiator, not just Nancy. It's not fair to make her be the only one, Dexter, who has to have a super annoying radiator. I love how sassy Dexter is too when Nancy is like, hey, my radiator is super loud. Are you going to do something about that? And Dexter gets so mad. It's like, there's only so many hours in a day and I'm the only person here. It's like, okay, yeah, but it's really annoying. Can you fix it still? Oh, we love it. We love it. Oh, and then there's the Sassy Detective magazine. We've got to have all of the classic items. I love that. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments down below, how the rooms look to you. Do they look like the rooms from the game? Are you getting vibes from the game? Does it feel like you are actually in Wickford Castle? Or if you were to bring a sim here, that it would actually feel like Wickford Castle? I certainly hope so. That's definitely what I'm going for when I do these recreations. And now here we go with the hallway decoration, adding in portraits everywhere. Basically every single portrait from the games goes in these hallways, and every single fancy portrait, every single old-looking portrait in all of the different colors, all of the different varieties, scattered randomly throughout the entirety of Wickford Castle. It just kind of had to happen that way because when Nancy walks around the hallways, that's what we can see. We can see all of the artwork, beautiful artwork up on the walls, and we don't have that much artwork in The Sims when it comes down to it. Like when you're trying to furnish a mansion, at least, we don't have that much artwork. Even when you size it up like I did with this painting to make it take up a whole wall. Nice little hacks to try and make it work a little bit easier. Same with the curtains too. I mean, the curtains technically aren't in the game, but it just felt like the space needed to be filled up with curtains. They needed to be there, so that's what I did. Oh, and wall decorations too, not just paintings. We had to do all the wall decorations as well. Again, anything that looked old, anything that looked like it belonged in a castle is on the walls, I can guarantee you. Basically everything from vampires, everything from cats and dogs, everything from paranormal stuff, which actually came quite in handy when doing this build, which was pretty fun. Everything from Get Together, lots of university artwork, all of the artwork. And I do scatter a couple of these console tables with the flowers here and there. And don't worry, I'm not going to make you watch the entirety of the wall decorating process, just the majority of it. And now we're now we're moving along to the main entryway space, where we have a bunch of knights in shining armor. Knight in shining armor never did nothing for nobody. A knight in dented, scraped armor, that's what you want. Let me know in the comments down below who said that line. So when I was doing the entryway here, I noticed that there are actually like these tiny little vases of roses in these corners, and I spent forever trying to find one that was big enough, and then I finally just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna put a pot here and I'm gonna put an actual rose bush in here because all the other ones looked so small in comparison, and they're very small in the game too. That's kind of fun when you do these recreations and you're trying to find all of the detailed decorations that are actually in these rooms. It's like, huh, I never noticed those tiny, tiny vases of roses. Very interesting. What I'm doing here is popping into the gallery to get artwork portraits specifically that I could use to line the stairways of Wickford Castle, because again, I was running out of art. I did not have a ton of choices, and I actually decided that putting in a bunch of portraits would fill in the space nicely. It would be pretty cohesive. Everything would look nice together, and it would allow me to do kind of a nice gallery wall looking thing without too much effort on the game's part. So if you didn't know that you could do this, you can go into the Sims 4 gallery and search for artwork of basically anything. You can find all of the completed paintings that your Sims could normally do. You can find those uploaded to the gallery. You can find photos of Sims uploaded to the gallery. And one of my favorite things to do is when people take pictures of custom content stuff, or they have their Sims paint custom content stuff, and then they upload those to the gallery. So you can actually get custom content artwork without downloading custom content in your game, because it's technically base game. It's technically a painting done by a Sim. It's one of my favorite life hacks for The Sims 4. So if you didn't know that you could do that, now you know. Super helpful, especially when you're running out of artwork and you need to fill in a giant castle. I also did add rugs to the entryway of Wickford Castle. There aren't any rugs in the game, but I can't leave a giant marble floor unrugged. It felt so incomplete to me. So I definitely added these in to help the space feel more finished. I was okay doing that as well. Same thing with the curtains on these windows. The curtains do not exist in the game, but I felt that they needed to be there. Otherwise, the whole wall just felt very empty. It's hard finding ways to fill in the wall space when you've been filling in wall space for hours. You start to run out of options, and you're just kind of like, yeah, you know what? I'm throwing a curtain up there. Good enough. That looks good. I do actually really like how it turned out. I've gotten a lot more confident with these renditions, just kind of making little tweaks here and there to make it something that I'm still happy with, that still conveys the game and still gets the idea of the game across. We're now moving on to the little sitting area where Lisa hangs out, and later in the game, Professor Hotchkiss. And I think this might be my favorite room in terms of how the furnishing came together. I felt like I was able to get a lot of furniture very close, very spot on to this space. The whole room feels complete. It feels nicely filled in, just the right amount of clutter. And I felt like the colors all work together. Even though it's a pretty bright space, I was really pleased with how all of the colors work together. This wallpaper is from the new Paranormal Stuff pack, and I was just dying to use this wallpaper in this build. I love this new wallpaper. I feel like the yellow might be one of my least favorite swatches of this particular wallpaper, but I still love it in this space. I needed something gold, and especially with the idea of Treasure in the Royal Tower and the gold theme that we have in this mystery, I felt like a nice bright gold wallpaper actually worked quite well. And hopefully you can imagine Professor Hotchkiss sitting in that armchair on the right-hand side there. A little plate of cookies there for her. I'm sure she would appreciate that. And eventually we'll get Lisa's chair in, so hopefully you can imagine Lisa hanging out by the fire, getting ready to gossip with Nancy about all the goings-on in the castle. That's definitely one of my favorite parts of doing these recreations is when I can get a room looking really close to the actual game, and I can imagine just walking in and being like, oh my gosh, I could totally see Lisa sitting there. It just makes me so happy. It makes these feel very rewarding and very fun. Using one of my favorite chairs in the game. I love that cats and dogs chair with the blanket thrown over the top, the plaid patterns, all of the colors. It's just so good. Putting a few decorations on the fireplace here to fill things in, make it look a little bit more decorated and complete. I really enjoy how this turned out. I feel like that bookshelf too looks super similar to the bookshelf from the game. So you can grab your Marie Antoinette book from that bookshelf and sit down on the chair opposite Lisa and read all about the French Revolution by the fire when you can't go out into the snow and go skiing. I also did this kind of thing where every dead end in the hallways, I decided to put a knight, because we have a bunch of knights in the game anyway. They're super expensive. They add to the overall cost of the lot, which I think is hilarious. It just makes it even more expensive. But in the game, in Treasure in the Royal Tower, when Nancy gets to a dead end, she'll find something there. It's usually like a blocked off doorway or like a staircase or an arch that looks like it should go somewhere, but it doesn't. So I can't really do that same thing in The Sims, because if I add in an arch, it'll just be a door and then that door will just go to nowhere. So I decided to add a bunch of knights at the end of all of the dead ends. And in my head, I was like, I feel like all of these knights have names. You know what I mean? Like, this is Sir George, and he's at the end of this hallway. And I can kind of imagine going through the hallways, doing exploring of Wickford Castle, and giving each of the knights a name. This is Sir Frederick at the end of the second corridor on the left of the upper floor. Something like that. These are more weird thoughts that you have when you've been building for 6+ hours. This is perhaps my other favorite room, or almost definitely my other favorite room in the build, building the Wickford Castle Library. I love the library of Wickford Castle. It is so iconic, and I'm really happy with how it turned out in the game as well. I decided that I would keep the library fairly messy and cluttered, but it's been tidied up a little bit. So maybe this is shortly after the events of the game Treasure in the Royal Tower take place. This could be shortly after that. So things have been tidying up. Like, the books have been put into piles at least. Maybe they haven't all been reshelved, but they're at least a little bit more organized. I do put a hole in the wall, which I loved doing. I was so excited about that. I just thought it was so funny having just the hole in the wall up by that desk, hidden by this painting too. Like, they put the painting back up on the wall, even though the culprit ripped it off, and they put the painting back up trying to hide it. Just love that idea. I also really enjoyed overlapping these bookshelves over and over again. I ran into a little snafu here where I had been building from the map build mode, and then I had to go in to Father Winter's save because I ran out of money, or perhaps more correctly, Father Winter ran out of money in his renovation of the castle. So I went into him, and now we have enough money because I gave him a bunch of money. But anyway, continuing on with the library, putting in this globe here just made me so happy. It's those moments when you have a perfect replica of what you need in the games that it's like, yes, globe. I'm so happy. Little chess table over here. It's actually a very functional library. Honestly, you could probably code the whole lot as a library too. Again, it has to be some sort of community lot. The one problem with the library is that I wasn't able to do the entire second floor. It is open, quite a bit larger than I do have it in this recreation. In the actual Treasure in the Royal Tower, the second floor is much more expansive. I just have this little ladder in the corner and then a little upper book area that's much smaller. And that's the area where Nancy would come out of the secret passageway, which I also couldn't include because the floor plan really prohibited it. It would be just a random hallway on the outside of the build. It wouldn't make any sense. We don't have elevators anyway. There's absolutely no way to do inner ducting or connections, anything like that. So we're going to have to use our imagination. I do apologize for not having that part of the build, or like the full basement tunnels, all of that sort of thing. I do end up adding the golden tower, but you just kind of have to imagine how your Sims would get there. Think about Nancy crawling through the walls, and then that's how it works. That's how we do it. I really wanted to use these university chairs because they had the right pink color, but then I realized we had these cool new paranormal stuff chairs with an even better pink color because we really needed a dusty pink, kind of rosish color for the chairs. We can see them tipped over in the game, so I obviously stood them back up because we can't tip chairs over in the game. That doesn't work. So again, going along with the idea that the library has been sort of put back together but isn't fully put back together. I toyed around too with the idea of filling in this empty space in the middle with a couch. The reason it's so empty is because in the game, Nancy you can have her move down to the middle of the room, and then because of the point and click style, she can like 360 turn all around her, but because of that, there's nothing in the middle of the room, and the middle of the room ends up needing to be very huge. I decided to keep it that way. I actually kind of liked how it looked because it showed off that beautiful paranormal stuff rug in that really cool teal color, which I thought kind of brought through the color of the walls that are actually supposed to be there. We don't have a nice forest green wallpaper in The Sims 4, and that's actually the wallpaper that the library is supposed to have. So the rug is carrying a little bit of the weight for that. This section of the library is something that I added as well. I needed kind of this hexagonal section in order to have the hexagonal section where Professor Hotchkiss can go and look through the little peephole. And we have the very cool stained glass windows, and that kind of gives us an idea of where the secret tower is and all of that sort of stuff. So there needed to be a space on the bottom of that, and I just decided to expand the library and have this nice little reading nook. This space, I was super happy with how this turned out as well. There's no entrance to it, again, so you're going to have to imagine that you get to it by getting through the bookcases, like there's a secret panel in the wall somewhere. Your Sims are just going to have to figure that out, or you can do a sneaky cheat and teleport them in here. But this is supposed to be Ezra Wickford's secret office, and I was so happy with how this turned out because I kept it really dark. I only lit it with candles or wall sconces. I added in a bunch of clutter and notes and papers, and then on one of the walls, I put in basically everything that looks like a naturalist collector kind of item. So I used all of these paintings from Realm of Magic. I got fish from the debug menu and put those on the wall. We unfortunately don't have any mounted insects, but I did put a bunch of insects around the room. So I've got fireflies, we've got a bunch of butterflies just all over the place. I really enjoyed how it looked, and then I used the candles from the paranormal stuff pack also in the debug menu, lots of debug items, and a couple of frogs to really fill in the space and make it feel like really cluttered, really left behind. Again, this space has just been recently discovered. Nancy was the first one to find it in a long time, so no one's really gone through it yet. Really looked through everything that Ezra Wickford actually left behind. So it's still in its original condition. And I love the idea of kind of like the creepy rocking chair there, like kind of ghostly in a way. I imagine Ezra Wickford sadly sitting in that rocking chair, looking up at these newspaper articles that I put on the wall. And those are supposed to reference the newspaper articles that he saved from Dexter's life. So some of them are sad and some of them are happy, and I can just really imagine Ezra Wickford rocking back and forth in that rocking chair and thinking back on his memories. Super sad, but super interesting too, I think. That's one of my favorite subplots in the entire Nancy Drew series. Let's be real. It's so good. We are now moving on to furnishing, the last space that I will show you guys, and this is the bedroom for Professor Hotchkiss. We finally made it to Professor Hotchkiss's bedroom. I like how her room turned out too. I was able to include everything that she needed. Instead of a typewriter, I gave the professor a laptop. I believe it's time for her to upgrade, and we don't have typewriters in The Sims 4, so that would be why I did that. I put a bunch of random things around on the desk too, like the candy jar. Like, let's be real, she definitely has a candy jar sitting on her desk at all times, so she can be snacking all through her work, which is perfect. I totally respect that. I personally have little candy snacks sitting right next to me at the moment. If you guys haven't tried these before, by the way, you totally should. They're called Brookside dark chocolate, and I love the acai blueberry flavored ones. They're just like dark chocolate on the outside and then chewy acai and blueberry in the middle, and oh my gosh, so good. They're like perfect to have when I just want something sweet after a meal for like a little snack or for a dessert, but I don't want like a big dessert or anything. So good. Highly recommend. What are your guys' favorite snacks when you're gaming, when you're building in The Sims, when you're playing Nancy Drew? Next time that we do our whole streamathon, I really want to try and get themed snacks for when we play the games together. So like for White Wolf of Icicle Creek, I would maybe have one of the foods from that game. Like I could make myself some French toast or something like that. For Mornings at Waverly Academy, I can make myself a bagel with cheese and some cookies and chips and all that good stuff. Very fun. I love that idea. That's part of the Instagram series that I've been doing on Instagram right now as well, are the best foods from the games. If you don't know, yes, the channel does have an Instagram, Wizard Kitten YT. You can follow on there. We do also have a Discord. Both of those are linked in the description down below. So if you want to join, you certainly can. A little plug for those. I always kind of forget about plugging those once in a while. Oh, and I lied. I guess the last space we're doing is the Golden Tower. So I tried to find the most opulent wall covering possible, and the closest we have is this Get Famous one, but it still doesn't do the room justice. It's as close as I could get because it's gold marble, and then we have the black and the white tile. I did the best I could. I really wish it was more opulent, but you know, we gotta work with what we have. And then I use a portrait of a fancy lady that does not look like Marie Antoinette's portrait, but you know, again, we work with what we got. Ultimately, I really enjoy how this entire build came together. I hope that you guys really liked it as well, but we are coming up on the screenshots here. There are quite a few of them, again, because this is a massive, massive build. If you watched both parts 1 and 2, thank you so much. You guys are amazing, and I love sharing this content with you, and I really appreciate that you enjoy this content as much as I do. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims 4 content. Thanks for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.